How's it going? Welcome back to another great video with your host, The Savior, and today we are going to be taking a look at one of those little hidden gems, one of those little sparkly sparkles. You know, Sony like to play it safe, okay? Let's be real. They play it safe with God of War, they play it safe by releasing The Last of Us over and over again, they're making Todd Howard blush. But hey, I get it, it just works, okay? People want to play a remastered version of The Last of Us 2, even though that game literally just came out like, it feels like only yesterday since Abby was donking and bonking everyone that she came into contact with, and boy oh boy did she like to bonk, if you remember that masterpiece.
Oh my god, they went straight for it. Okay, what the fuck was that? What the... Oh, I don't know what to say. The game that keeps on giving. Thank you, Last of Us. That was very tasteful.
But hey, I'm not one to judge, okay? This is the Savior over here, and we are unbiased, and our perspective is open, and we are all-inclusive over here, of course. So even Sony can crap out an original gem now and then, and that's exactly what they did with Days Gone. I think that this game was actually a very solid experience, but sadly it did not get any love on release, and it took many years for it to actually pick up a cult following and for people to realize, hey, this game is actually quite good. Yes, it does many generic things on paper, but moment-to-moment gameplay of Days Gone was surprisingly refreshing. And if you're not aware, the Days Gone Remastered edition is coming out very shortly. So today I'm going to be giving you my Days Gone 2025 review, and we're going to take a look at the remastered features and answer, is Days Gone Remastered worth playing? Should you go out and buy the DLC update? And is Days Gone still good in 2025? What has changed since release? So I do hope you enjoy this yearly review in which we look back at all the games, give them deeper analysis now in the current year, and find out if it's worth playing or not. Days Gone was actually a good game, and it took a long time for the gaming community to kind of realize that, but there were aspects that made it not an instant hit, and to me, some of the criticisms were fair. You know, it was quite generic in the story department, some of the emotional depth wasn't quite there compared to other big Sony games like God of War or The Last of Us. You know, the whole relationship with him and his wife, which is kind of the main center of this game, just didn't hit for some people, and I can understand that. You know, it's not the most engaging writing, but it's solid enough that most people can probably look past it and enjoy it for what it is, and then just soak in this gameplay, this majestic open world that Days Gone actually had.
Now you have my attention.
Yes, it wasn't brimming with life, it wasn't as detailed or immersive as some other big games out there like Red Dead Redemption 2 or something like that, but it did nail that, zombie apocalypse vibe. There's been plenty of Walking Dead games, but sadly none of them have actually captured what it would be like to live in the world of The Walking Dead. To me, Days Gone was that experience. It was that window into that world, and that's what I just found so engaging about it, and I think a lot of people, enjoyed it for that as well. Looking after your bike, maintaining your bike, upgrading your weapons, unlocking new weapons, and then of course it has all of these extra features like these giant hordes, which now the technology isn't that impressive after, Space Marines 2, after World War Z, but back then it was still very, very much a new thing, and people just completely looked past it, and even today, the horde technology is, still impressive, especially with the remastered version coming up. It's pretty much on par with Space Marines 2 and stuff. So today I'm going to get into all of the goodness of Days Gone for this Days Gone 2025 review, so come with me on this journey of, I guess we can call it nostalgia, even though it's only 6 years old at this point. I'm sure in 10 years we're going to have to literally sacrifice and pray to the Lord Cthulhu just to play a AAA video game, because they're going to be so expensive that the only way that we can afford it is by offering our newborn babies to the Lords Todd Howard and the Ubisoft masterminds to just allow us to play these quadruple A video games as prices continue to skyrocket, and I will literally have to sell both my kidneys to play any new Nintendo titles. So, you know, gaming is just, it's aging like a fine wine.
Another martini, Paul.
Now, if you're curious about Days Gone or you want something fresh to play, something new, use my link down below for instant gaming, because you can grab yourself a game on a massive discount on a huge sale just by using my link. So I hope that helps you guys. It's just a way to give back to the community, and it does help support the channel, so it's a win-win situation, a no-brainer. If you want to play any new games, use my link down below in the comments, because you will save so much money. I've already saved a lot of money thanks to instant gaming. Now, I do hope you enjoy this 2025 review of Days Gone. If you do, consider liking the video, as that really does help out a smaller independent channel. Someone who is trying to do this full time, I would really appreciate the support, and just leaving your thoughts down below in the comments, because that's the whole reason I do this, to actually have a conversation with you guys, the wise ones, and you know, have that back and forth around media, philosophy, all of that good stuff on my channel. That's the whole reason, is to actually have that back and forth. So if you love OG YouTube, you love gaming analysis, video reviews, early access reviews, and philosophical content, you're in the right place. That is what this channel is all about. So consider subscribing, become a wise one today. So I'm going to break it down into some negatives and positives, and then discuss the remastered edition and, you know, what I think the Days Gone Remastered review videos will say about this, because some people are not happy. If you don't know, that basically on PC you will have to basically upgrade to get this DLC. Okay, so that's basically what Days Gone Remastered is. It's a graphical overhaul, basically bringing it up to PC standards almost. Adding a few new features like ray tracing, lighting, you know, greater foliage and all that kind of stuff, and then they're throwing on a DLC on top of that, which basically add customized modes like permadeath mode to make it much more realistic and hardcore if you want that experience, or speedrunning mode where you can basically play a game on like this kind of challenge run. And then finally they have the new horde mode gameplay option, endless hordes, and you get upgrades and all that kind of stuff for doing so. So that is what this remastered Days Gone update actually is. Okay, it's a small tweak to the visuals and a small DLC included.
I want more, and I know I shouldn't.
So for PC players, is Days Gone Remastered worth it? Let's simply answer that question right now. I don't think so, okay? Unless if you're desperate to play the horde mode, all the other features are moddable, okay? This game, surprisingly on PC, is booming with mods, okay? The mod scene on this game is actually quite impressive. So if you want to tweak it graphically or change some gameplay elements, then you can already do that with mods, okay? So there's no reason to buy the DLC, in my opinion, for PC. But for people who have never played this, hell yeah, this is going to be a great update for you guys. And there's a new DLC with the horde mode and permadeath and more options. And for die-hard fans of the PS4 release, if you're on PS5 now, of course it's a no-brainer if you're happy to spend that cash. I'm not happy with constant remasters and remakes. I think it's very greedy, and Sony is a prime example of that greed, especially when they don't space them out. But on a game like this, which is showing its age a little bit, you know, it's 6 years, so to me that's just about acceptable. If it was just coming out last year or so, I would say that's ridiculous, just like they did with Horizon and all that kind of stuff. But I honestly think that this could do with a facelift, especially as it was underappreciated at the time as well. So that's my quick 2 cents on the Days Gone Remastered review situation, what I would recommend, and you know, if it's actually worth it or not. So now let's talk about the actual game and, you know, all of the quality of life changes and updates since then to now, what's actually changed. I'm not going to go over absolutely everything because it's already been done. I'm going to talk about what's new, why I personally love this game, and what is actually good about it from a fair, objective, analytical take. But of course I've got some biases, as I am a huge fan of The Walking Dead, the original 2 or 3 seasons. I'm a huge fan of that. After that, well, you know, money talks, am I right? Okay, so Days Gone, boys. What do I actually think about this game? Well, like I said, I can understand why a lot of people said it was generic on release. You know, I'm glazing it a little bit, I gotta be honest, to begin with. But I do overall enjoy this game. I had a blast playing it. I didn't get bored of it until towards the end of the game. And that was mostly, you know, the actual story of the game that didn't really hold my attention. But what I actually loved about this game was just the slow progression of this. You know, it really does a good job of leading you through the game world and feeling weak to begin with, and then slowly, you know, becoming stronger and stronger. And I know that sounds like all video games out there, but it does such a great job because it's not just your arsenal and your abilities that get better over time, but also your bike, okay? And your motorcycle is a huge component to why Days Gone is such a good game. So when you first get this little piece of junk, okay, it's complete trash, okay? It runs like absolute garbage. I've never seen a real motorcycle run this badly ever, and I don't think anyone would ever try and repair it if it ran this badly when they first got it. Because to begin with, you really have to manage your gas, and that's what makes it so fun. It's not one of those games that pretends to have, you know, like a hardcore survival mechanic and then just ditches it. This actually matters. So when you're out in the world, you actually really have to pay attention to how much fuel you have left in your tank and where is the nearest place you can restock, okay? So if there's a gas station nearby, if there's a camp that might have some, you know, jerry cans and stuff like that, that was so fun to me. And then slowly upgrading your vehicle, you know, changing the suspension, changing the tires, getting the engine to be stronger because it takes a lot of damage very quickly. That's so cool, and it really makes you feel, you know, like this kind of Daryl character from The Walking Dead, you know, riding around on your motorcycle and just, you know, kind of avoiding zombies or, you know, taking out enemy camps. That was such a fun time to me, and I think they did a great job with just the upgrading system of the bike itself. The next thing that I found quite refreshing is simply the world design itself. So, you know, I am a huge fan of Fallout. If you know, you know. If you're subscribed to the channel and you're a wise one, thank you very much. But I'm a huge die-hard fan of Fallout. So it was very refreshing to me to go back to a world where it's not completely destroyed. It's just completely dead. You know, there's no real, you know, communities or humanity left. It's just full of raiders and zombies. So you still get this beautiful environment, but it is a complete wasteland or apocalypse as you explore. I just really love that aesthetic to it. It's absolutely beautiful to look at, and with the remastered graphics, it's gonna be even more crazy. Now, sadly, I don't think the same can be said for the story. The story didn't exactly hook me. It's very cliche, very generic, you know, a man who believes his wife is completely gone and basically, you know, is on that search for redemption. He's kind of lost himself. He's become a brutal bastard because the world has changed him into that, even though he was actually a nice guy before. Very cliche stuff, and of course then the zombie apocalypse on top of everything. You meet a lot of interesting characters. None of them really hooked me. They all felt very much like video game characters, not actual people in this world. The only person I would say that didn't feel like that is your kind of bro companion at the beginning of the game, and that's only because you're with him for the very beginning. But a lot of the characters just didn't feel very believable to me, and the writing certainly did not help, as the writing is quite bad in this game, I've got to be honest. But there are times, there are emotional moments, and the main character himself, if you don't know, he's the same guy who voiced Starkiller, I think that's what he's called in that Star Wars game, The Force Unleashed, and he's done a bunch of other Star Wars stuff. His character in this is quite menacing, but at times he likes to play the good guy, so the character that you're playing as is actually quite interesting, but there's no real consistency to him because he can kind of flip-flop between being like this good guy and then brutally murder people and be very, you know, hostile and aggressive when the time comes. But I think that doesn't really play into his character dynamic because when he is pushed into that situation, his animal side is released. So that was quite interesting. So what do you actually do in Days Gone? Well, basically what you will be doing is doing a bunch of side missions for a bunch of different characters, different kind of group factions that you go throughout and different factions that you help out throughout the game, you know, different kind of towns, and basically you can build up, you know, an allegiance with these different groups, which is quite interesting. The more you do the side content, then you get better guns and stuff like that. You get better unlocks over time, and this does also, you know, continue with the story progression because you will be moving across different areas as the story progresses. So there's a main campaign mode. It's like most open world games, you know, kind of your Ghost of Tsushima or even a Ubisoft style type game where there's a lot of side activities, but at least they did try and, you know, attach some narrative to the side content. But there is a lot of clearing out camps, destroying hordes, which is where the real fun is, and destroying zombie camps as well, you know, where they kind of are nesting and stuff like that. So it's got a little bit of elements from State of Decay, from Last of Us, and then this horde mode on top of it. Like I said, now we can say it's like Space Marines 2 or something like that, or World War Z, but back then it was refreshing. And that's where you can find these giant hordes out in the open world, and trust me, they are very dangerous because they can completely mess up your shit, and it's just a lot of fun, you know, driving away quickly, you know, just before the horde gets to you, or you see a big pack of zombies and getting, you know, getting your ass out of there on your bike, you know, starting that piece of shit up, rolling it down a hill to save gas. You know, everything has weight and just, you know, like detail in Days Gone, and I think that's why it's very visceral and just fun, but it doesn't really hook you forever. That's the problem, because a lot of it is repetitive, I felt, but the core gameplay stuff is good. The third person shooting is rather basic, I've got to be honest. It never felt that amazing. The melee combat was actually fun and I did enjoy that. The weighty driving in this game was the most fun to me, but there is a lot of just emptiness out there, and there's no good exploration where you kind of come across a cool area. There's a side story there, environmental storytelling, some good loot to find. It's not that type of game. You go and you upgrade your vehicle, you upgrade your weapons, and you complete missions or these, you know, side open world, just kind of junky tasks. It's one of those games just to switch off your brain and have a good time with. It's not necessarily very deep narratively or gameplay wise with its structure, but it all works well together, and because they all work well together, it builds up this overall good package of a good survival zombie experience, which you can make hardcore or you can make very, you know, easy and light depending on your playstyle. And especially now with the remastered options, it will allow for, you know, all kind of players to enjoy Days Gone. So that's my opinion on Days Gone. That is my Days Gone 2025 review. I don't have too much to say about this game. You know, I don't want to just retread old grounds and talk about every single thing because that's already been done. But I do enjoy this game, and I do think it was criminally underrated because it was not a bad game by any means. It's by no means a masterpiece. And like I said, it really scratched my Walking Dead itch. You know, I've never had an open world, proper good zombie game except for this. I just wish that the characters felt more alive. There were more interesting things to break up exploration when you're out in the open world, not just, you know, copy and pasted, you know, checklist, you know, things to do like you would get in a Ubisoft game. That to me got very old very quickly. And the actual story missions themselves, there's a lot of stealth, which doesn't, you know, it's not the most interesting, to be honest. And the narrative just wasn't strong enough for me to say that this is the best game ever. But for experiencing that open world zombie survival, you know, gameplay, I would say this is one of the best games out there for that particular experience. It just shows you that there hasn't been many good single player zombie open world games, to be honest. And I think Days Gone did a great job of that atmosphere and of that gameplay when it comes to the action with the zombie hordes especially, and just fighting different enemy types in general. There was enough enemy variation, I felt. You know, it just could have added more to this game, you know, a morality system or something just to make it a little bit more weighty and something to have a little bit more impact in the game world itself, because they set up the interesting foundations, and it would have been cool to, you know, like see maybe different camps go to war with each other and stuff like that, but it just never reached its full potential in my opinion. But I do think Days Gone is a good game. So is Days Gone worth it in 2025? I would say yes it is, especially if you didn't play it on release. Now's the time to, you know, try this game out because it is a good game. Just don't go in there expecting, you know, like a gripping story narrative, but it will be for some people. I'm just speaking, on my own personal biases, it didn't really hit me with the narrative, but the gameplay was enjoyable, that's for sure. So check it out if you haven't done that before. Let me know what you think about Days Gone in the comments down below, and I'll be seeing you in the next video. Have a great day. Peace out.
I want more. And I know I shouldn't.